Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi, and welcome back to That Trippi Show. This week, a MAGA faceplant of epic proportions, and I think it pretty much gives us a roadmap to win in 2024. Actually, make that multiple MAGA faceplants.
Multiple.
But we'll get to that. And also with the economy continuing to improve, something we've been talking about on this podcast for some time. What factors are already pointing to a Biden victory? Lots of work to be done, but some numbers, when you look under the hood, I think are really important for everybody to understand. Alex, where do you want to get started?
This is going to be a fun one because we get to talk about nice things about Joe Biden that are all true, which is great. We get to talk about MAGA messing up, which is also great.
Well, they do that a lot, but this is pretty spectacular.
I know, Joe, you've been calling it the Chaos Congress basically since they started this mess. But is this the lowest they've sunk so far? We have a lot to compare it to, I know, at this point, but like, what the hell?
I mean, you got two really embarrassing failures in the course of a week. And, I would say it's starting to become a trend, but actually they haven't done it. Yeah. It's been a long-standing trend here. I mean, the Mayorkas impeachment thing, this was a core pledge from MAGA Mike Johnson, the speaker. He had to get this done. They were, he's been hanging by a thread, and he couldn't get the votes to impeach DHS Secretary Mayorkas. I mean, the fascinating thing about this, Peter, the Speaker of the House has one job, only one job, really. It's counting votes, something that Nancy Pelosi was pretty damn good at. She knew where all the votes were and what and she was always right. This guy somehow misses that every Democrat was actually going to show up. I can't remember who it was. There was a Democratic member of Congress on one of the cable networks saying, like, the one thing the Speaker Johnson should always count on is that every Democrat will be there to vote, everyone. But of course, he didn't think that Al Green would show up and vote. He had been in the hospital literally that day. But anyway, my point here is it just shows the incredible, well, one, how brittle and fragile the MAGA majority, ability with MAGA Mike is, and two, the incompetence of it, because they should have foreseen that they were going to lose this vote. But they went through with it anyway, and it failed. So, I mean, that's one. I mean, it's always going to be hard with the slim majority they have of 3 seats. And
they lost 3 on this one.
Yeah, they lost 3, and with the Santos seat open next week, it's only going to get harder for MAGA. Which, by the way, folks, is why we need to do everything we can to help Tom Suozzi next Tuesday in New York 3, flip that seat, because that will put even more pressure on the speakership and their majority. And it's going to be interesting to see how whether he can survive this. I mean, we already saw.
We're talking about MAGA Mike.
Yeah, MAGA Mike. The only thing that's happened, the only thing they've done is thrown out a speaker and held him hostage, and now and now MAGA Mike has failed in the one job he had, which was to get to the impeachment, which they're going to bring up again. But it's just not clear that there won't be some more defectors over time here. You still have the 18 members in Biden's seats who just, by the way, he made them walk the plank. Here's where this gets just so incompetent and so idiotic. The whole reason you don't bring these votes to the floor if you don't have the votes is because you're demanding that people in the battleground districts cast a vote that is going to put them in dire danger of defeat in November 2024. And so you don't put them in that position, make them vote for impeachment when they're in a Biden, a Biden district that Biden won, and you don't make them cast that vote unless you have all the votes. So at least you got to the impeachment trial. Now you got Mayorkas out there, and you're making your case at least. It's as crazy as that case might be, and that we all know, you don't put those members in that position, and so he screwed everything up. One, he didn't have the votes, he didn't count, and then two, he made all those 18 members, or most of them, walk the plank, cast a vote in favor of impeaching Mayorkas, which they will get called on because of how crazy that is. Who knows how? Because now that vote's going to have to come up again. So he's going to make them walk the plank twice. It's just complete insanity. And that's just the first one.
Right. Well, and before we zoom out, this is like a really important point. It's not just it's counting the votes, and you've been there. We've worked on a ton of congressionals at this point, but in your career, you've advised a ton of Congress people in basically this exact scenario where it's a tight vote, and literally hours before the vote, people are still horse trading, votes are still being flipped. And so when you have a really slim majority, one vote really can make all the difference. And so not only them trying to get attempting to do it anyway and failing, but I mean, literally that one vote can totally change. I mean, the Clinton budget in 94, 93,
that was Marjorie Margolis-Mosvinsky, my candidate. She was a member of Congress. We had won that district in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, for the first time in something like 97 years, a Democrat, first time they had won it. And it was a tie vote. It was absolutely tied if you're watching C-SPAN for Clinton's budget, which would raise taxes, or that's what the Republicans were pushing up against. And by the way, it was a deadly vote. I called her, and we were talking on the phone 10 minutes before that vote, before she walked down. And I told her, you do not vote for this. Do not do it. And she assured me that she wouldn't. The only thing that was bad about that call was had I made it a few minutes later, because when I hung up the phone with her, the very next phone call was from President Bill Clinton asking her and convincing her that for the sake of his presidency and this important bill, he really needed her to go down and break the tie. And so, to my astonishment, I'm watching, probably CNN at the time, and she's walking down the aisle to cast that vote. And I'll never forget this, folks, because as she was walking down that aisle, the Republican caucus broke out and singing "Ding Dong, the Wicked Witch is Dead." And she went through with it. She voted. She did the right thing, despite my consultant hat advising her not to. But it was a very important vote. It had a big impact on the economy and where the country headed post that vote on the budget. But yeah, one vote can make a big difference. And by the way, Al Green showing up, under really incredible circumstances, coming, literally wheeled in on in his hospital garments. I think, if I'm following the story right, yesterday. No one expected that. Certainly not MAGA Mike
certainly
Johnson.
Not Mike Johnson.
But anyway, so yeah, no, one vote can make a difference. But again, that was one. The interesting thing about that vote too, though, was you had it magically and mystically about 32 different Democrats post that vote faced ads that said they cast the deciding vote that raised your taxes. Right. In other words, like it didn't matter that she was the one that did it. The Republicans had that and used it, in the midterm, to hurt Democrats. But the whole point of this is, yeah, all those Democrats walked that plank, but it worked. We won the vote. This was
right.
So we paid a price for it, but we did something. We did something for the country. This one is no. This is you're walking the plank to impeach somebody with there's no case. They haven't even weren't able to even prove the case to get a vote, to get their own party to vote in unison for the thing. And they're going to be forced to do it again. So anyway, I just think that those 18 Republicans in the Biden districts are now in, and by the way, this won't be the only one. There'll be several more votes this year that they'll have to cast that the MAGA cult caucus is going to force them to do. And they've already lost 4 seats due to redistricting things that are already,
it'll probably be more.
The new seat in Alabama, a couple in New York and other places, there'll probably be more. So you can just see how this is all fading very fast. It's going to be, it's clear to me that the one thing that's very likely, and I think more people are coming around to this, is that Democrats will reclaim the House in November.
Well, and by the way, your standard bearer for your party has proven that he's not going to get, definitely not over 47, maybe at this point 46.
Right.
Like, that if you add in all those factors, this is a hell of a time for them to attempt. Like, this is what I don't get and what I will never get. And maybe it's just because they've cycled through so many veterans in the House who've like been there and understand how it works and are essentially have like
those guys are
a bunch of MAGA rookies running this. Right. But like, fundamentally, you put legislation on the floor to do one of two things. You either do it to pass the legislation or you do it to put in a marker and show where members are voting to use in a campaign later. They're not doing either. To your point, they're not doing either of those things.
No, they're doing the opposite.
It's wild.
First of all, this thing is ridiculous because it wouldn't do anything. Even if so they get to impeachment,
they'd get some televised hearings. They'd get to make a big deal about the border,
and all through it, the 18. This is what I'm trying to say. There's a cost to doing these things, particularly when later on the Senate doesn't even take it up or dismisses it or what. There's all kinds of, or frankly, do they even have the votes to convict him if they do? To actually impeach him? Well, they didn't. So anyway, it's crazy. It's not just that they don't have a case. It's that this was the most important thing, the thing MAGA Mike Johnson promised, and he completely failed. And I think it's going to add to the burden that cost them the House. Gratefully.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate the help.
But like, and I know we got to get to the other MAGA faceplant, but like the idea, this is again just what I don't understand. Okay, we get that they don't want to govern, which again teases us up to the next thing. We get that, but now they're acting like they don't want to win either, right? Like, it's not mutually exclusive normally, but like it's very odd that they're not only. Okay, I get that they're trying to shut down everything and torpedo it to screw Biden over. Understood. They're doing that, but they're also not doing it in a way that's conducive to victory. It's very odd.
So then you get to the second phase plant, which kind of undoes the Mayorkas thing,
right? Because
it exposes it for what it is. That Mayorkas thing is a stunt, and so what you realize, is the Senate, has a bipartisan border security deal that, was led by Senator Langford, Republican from Oklahoma, and no fan of Joe Biden's. And then, and by the way, it had a lot of support, a lot of bipartisan Republicans and Democrats. It was all ready to go. The Republicans had campaigned for years on fixing the borders, and they get the Democrats to compromise heavily and give them just about everything they wanted, actually gave them everything they wanted. And then, boom, it all falls apart. And the reason? The Trump torpedo. Trump basically puts out, no, I don't want this. I don't want the border solved. I want to use it. So, they've been screaming, the border, it's crazy, it's horrible, it's an open border. And the whole time not doing anything to stop it, because that was all political and all a stunt to, performance art to keep calling, keep calling attention to the border and the fact that, all these people were coming and it was Biden's fault because he wouldn't do anything and so let's take that all at face value. Well, okay, we're going to do it all. And it's a bill. And it's the bill you asked for. It's the bill you demanded. If you don't get this, you're not voting for Ukraine or anything else. So Lankford puts the bill out there. And the really crazy thing is you see this with Republicans. Here's somebody doing the right thing.
Right.
And when he calls out that, he's been threatened with ending his career by
he's
some
probably
commentator.
like, where the hell am I supposed to go now? Right. Like,
yeah. But he says some popular commentator called me and told me that if I continued with this, that he would destroy me. It still won't mention that it's Donald Trump. He will not say it was who the popular commentator was that sabotaged this thing, but we all know it was Donald Trump. So this is what I'm saying is you got the double face plant that exposes all of their garbage about the border is fake. It's phony outrage to anger their base, to wave the red flag in front of their base and get them stoked up. And they don't want it to be solved. As you point out, they don't want to govern. They just want to stoke MAGA and make sure that they've got the border to keep you very, very afraid, everybody, to vote for Trump. It's not, this double face plant has, I think, put the Democrats and Biden finally in a position where the worm has turned and Democrats now have a way to clearly communicate what the game has been from the beginning and where the blame literally deserves to be on the foot of, Donald Trump. The wall never worked. It was a freaking joke. Mexico never paid for it. It was all
I
a
remember
stunt.
that. That was funny.
Yeah. And all of this, the Mayorkas impeachment that failed, the bill that was everything they asked for and nothing that Democrats wanted. I mean, all the things that we would usually put in it were out. And so there they had the bill that they wanted, they demanded for years and years. Trump couldn't get that passed. It was going to get passed under Biden. And, maybe it still will somehow, but no, it was complete bullshit from the get-go.
It's kind of like, I know we know Trump doesn't care. Trump has one thing, and that's Trump. But I mean, he's not poisoning himself with this. He's poisoning those. I mean, first of all, those 18 Republican House members in Biden won districts. He's torpedoing. I mean, even if he doesn't care about the country, which he clearly doesn't, it still boggles my mind once again. And this goes back to MAGA Mike. They are not thinking tactically whatsoever because this doesn't help him win either. Like it anyway. I do want to just ask, and kind of bundle this in. We do occasionally get questions from our listeners about what Democrats should do on the border. And I think I know what you're going to say, but Michelle J wrote in, she wanted to know how, and this was actually before this whole thing blew up, so I'm really interested in your take now, but she said, one thing I think Biden needs to address is the border. I think it needs to be talked about more often in public by all Democrats, how we've tried to work to get consensus on the issue. And it would be nice to see them reach out to the other side, which obviously they now have. And I think she by the way then said, thanks for all you do, and everybody at Lincoln and Resolute, and she says she knows where to go to find her sanity and her people. So thank you for that, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks. I think that what I just said, I think that the worms turned where, for instance, 67%, some massive number, when you look under the hood, a massive number of Americans believe, when asked the question, do you want mass deportation, which is Trump's solution that he's promised if he's elected president, or a path to citizenship, which, by the way, was not in this bill. that option was not there. 67% sign up for path to citizenship. And so what I'm saying is this bill did a lot of enforcement at the border, would shut the border down at any point when over 5,000 people a day were coming across, it would shut it down. And by the way, when the border shuts down, it doesn't shut down for a day. It really shuts down. This was the most conservative and strong bipartisan, but mostly just a clean what the conservatives would have wanted, and that Biden had agreed to support, and that Democrats were going to provide the votes if they could get it to the floor. And the Senate was working, and it looked like the whole problem was going to be the Senate was going to approve it. The votes were there. And of course, MAGA Mike and MAGA Congress were screaming it's dead on arrival before it had even been made public. And of course, Trump was screaming, it's the worst bill in history. It's a disaster. It's an open border bill, again, before it had ever been released. Once it was released publicly, and once it was clear that enough votes were there in the Senate and the pressure would be on the House, Trump went to work. And Trump started, and he as a popular commentator, called Langford, told him he'd be destroyed and ruined. He would ruin his career, although Langford will not mention the name of the unmentionable guy. Although Langford, heroically, in my view, is becoming one of the few Republicans who's willing to buck Trump and is fighting on and calling it out, even though he won't say the name. But the rest folded. There's not enough votes in the Senate now. And so the bill faceplant again, and it's very obvious. And so to answer the question, yeah, because that's pretty clear. There's an easy way to explain that to the American people, that there was a bipartisan agreement, that Joe Biden was working to address it and would have signed it, and that Donald Trump, for his own purposes, basically took the border, threw it away, didn't care about all those thundering hordes he talks about, because he wanted them and needs them to scare the hell out of people to somehow beat Biden in November. Well, I think the American people will get that, particularly now that it's pretty clear that's all this was ever about. So yeah, you're right. We need to talk about it. We now have a way to talk about it in a way that should make it very clear to enough Americans that makes that Trump ceiling drift a little lower and puts even more pressure on the Republicans to hold the House and maybe even be able for us to hold the Senate. We'll see. That's always going to be a tougher job because of the states that are up. But it's becoming, I think, the contrast between MAGA and Trump, their complete abandonment of anything, any principles at all, or any ability to get anything done. They have literally nothing has been done since the Republicans, since McCarthy was Speaker and now MAGA Mike Johnson. Literally nothing has happened. And we're not clear still whether there'll be any funding bills passed for Israel, Ukraine, the border. It's just a mess that the American people, I think it's going to start become clear who exactly is responsible for it. And it's not Joe Biden, folks. He's actually done an incredible job on the economy, despite their wailing. And just, no one has accomplished as much as he has in the first 2.5, 3 years.
And I wanted to get to this last week, but we had a pretty awesome guest episode to get to. But I think you probably saw Joe Biden quote tweeting when Elmo asked how everyone's doing. The answer for most of the GOP right now is not great.
Not great. Yeah,
that was pretty funny. All right, Joe, I do want to get under the hood just for a little bit this week. And I want to try to do this more as we get into 2024. I mean, we're really already in it. You and I are for sure. But as people are starting to perk up, every time we do this, every time you have a little nugget to point out, we get a lot of comments and write and say, do more of this. So we're going to try, especially because it seems like we're the only ones calling it out. So whenever we have a couple interesting points, we'll do it. Joe, what are you tracking this week that we should be aware of?
The new Quinnipiac poll is interesting. First of all, I want to correct you. Simon Rosenberg,
That is true.
Tom
Yeah.
Bonnier. There are people out there who have been really vigilant about looking under the hood at the polling numbers and taking on the same group, the same pollsters that pump the red wave are out there already. Are doing the Biden can't win stuff, and you throw those numbers out because they're bullshit. When you look at the Quinnipiac poll, it now has Biden up 40 to 46 on Trump. What you look at is forget the head to head in that sense. It's really where was it, in December, because it's the same pollster. So in December, it was 47 Biden, 46 Trump. Now it's 50 to 46. The interesting thing, and has been to me, is Trump keeps sitting at 46. And just so people refresh, I know people, sometimes I repeat myself, but there's some things that are worth repeating. 2016, Trump got 46% of the vote. 2020, he got 46.7. And the number keeps coming up, 46, 46. Where was Joe Biden in 2020? He was at 51. So in December, it was 47, 46. Now it's 50, 46. Independents are for Biden in this poll, 52, 40. He's growing support among independents.
Which, if that's the number, he's home for. If that holds.
That's what gets you to 50, right? That's the kind of stuff that gets you to 50. And now the gender gap is widening. With women, Biden's up 58 to 36, which again was up from December when it was 53, 41. Now it's 58, 36.
Right. If you lose women by 22 points, you can't win the presidency.
Yeah, because there's simple math. There's more women who vote than men because us guys, we drop earlier than them, and there's more of them, but they're still around. And they tend to be, even in minority, we learned this in the Alabama campaign with Doug Jones. The people that really fueled that turnout were African American. In that community were women. And so they lead the charge. That doesn't mean they can get the men to come along because they're 53-42 in support of Trump. So that's the big gap there. And largely that's unchanged from December. It was 51-41 in December. So again, where Trump is, everything's in cement. It stays exactly the same. But the Biden gaps that the groups that are moving are all moving to Biden, and they're logical. Women, independents, and I think again we've been talking about it's the contrast between the MAGA crazy, the Trump dictator wannabe stuff. That contrast with Joe Biden, even if these same people, many of them think he's old and boring or have issues on the economy. Again, I think the issues on the economy are that weight that's been around him and dragging him is getting lighter every day. There's more and more economic indicators and consumer confidence numbers that are showing that the American people, even though it's not his approval rating yet, it will. And I think that contrast, though, between what he's been able to do and what Trump and MAGA are working to destroy in a lot of ways, or stunt raging on the border, which will become clearer, I think is starting to really seep in. And I think is responsible for when you look at the movement, it's clear that things are shifting in a way that I'd much rather be where Biden is today than Trump. And also, again, like I said, two things. The economy was a weight around Biden, obviously, after the pandemic and people, had to face real things, gas prices, inflation. But that's all improving and the confidence numbers are going up. The second weight that I think just got lighter is the border, because it's now clear there's a narrative that can be waged to make it clear, at least not to shift all of it away, but again, the weight of that, of the worries around the border, the attacks from the Republicans on the border, that weight just got lighter because of their own faceplants this week. So I think on both, and Biden and Democrats' ability now to fight back and make it clear that it was a political stunt. That's all it ever was. So the two factors that have been sort of holding Biden and Democrats are getting lighter, while the Republicans, it's becoming clear what the contrast is and clear that the chaos is dangerous to the future. I mean, look at what they're doing on the border right now. They'll let this crap continue, all to use it as a political wedge against Biden.
Joe, that I think is a pretty good place for us to end today. We're just about out of time.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Alex. And thank everyone for listening to That Trippi Show. This podcast will always be free with support from our advertisers and is part of Resolute Square. Check out the latest at resolutesquare.com/Trippi. Please subscribe to The Trippi Show and leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question in a review on iTunes. The last few episodes have actually been among our most listened to, so if you can continue to pass along to your friends that to give us a listen, we'd sure appreciate it. Thanks, Alex, and we'll see you all next week.
Resolute Square.